I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Future Signal. And on this episode, I'm super excited to have back Andy Bryant. Andy is a good friend, and this will be his it's his fifth time coming on the podcast, but this will be his first time coming on Future Signal. In the past, he was on the previous iteration of this podcast called More Than Blockchain. This will be his first time on Future Signal. On Future Signal, as the name implies, I'm really looking to talk to people who can kind of give us signals about the future. And obviously, AI is a huge part of that. So I'm going to bring up Andy up on stage. And before he comes up on stage, though, I want to say I've created a slideshow of, it makes no sense. Normally, I'm really kind of meticulous about the slideshow, and I want there to be a flow, and we're going to touch upon this, we're going to touch upon that. This slideshow is probably not that. We may go into other websites that I have opened here on my tabs. We may touch upon different things when it comes to AI. We're just kind of going to let the conversation go where it goes. And I will say in the beginning of the slideshow, though, we will recap the episodes that Andy has previously been on. So you can go look for those and find those. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Bryant up on stage. There he
is. Hey, what's up?
That was a nice Fonz entrance. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I'm like sliding in. You know,
exactly.
Like, hey, how's it going? Glad to be here.
Andy, thanks for coming back. I was saying in the intro that you definitely heard that you've been on before, and you'll see this in one of the slides, but you have been on before 3 times on mic, and then one time there was a lost episode. All great rappers have their lost episodes or their lost albums or their mixtapes that they, as Drake said, lost on the BlackBerry in Cabo. So we have that too. I still actually have that footage. Maybe one day we can dive into that and launch that, because you said some really, as you do on every episode, I think you help our listeners and you help the audience stay about maybe 3 to 6 months ahead on what's about to happen, which in AI I feel like is a long time. So anyway, Andy, how's life? How's things?
Things are great. Unfortunately, I'm finding that any ability to stay 6 months ahead has become 3 months ahead, and then it becomes 6 weeks ahead. And I think we're at this point, we're like 22 minutes ahead. So I will, by the time I release that this has actually saved and everything, we're going to be behind. So that's the caveat with the speed that this industry is moving in.
Love it. I absolutely love it. You have not seen this slideshow. Normally, I try to co-create the slideshow with the guests so that way they have an idea of what's going to happen. And there's actually a slide in here that I didn't have that I kind of want to ask you about. But let's just before we start, I think we want to start with defining AI. And if you're open to it, I would like you to actually dive into the difference between AI and if there is a difference that we need to talk about between AI and AGI. But if you could, let's start with defining AI for people. And also, Andy has been on before on the podcast. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform or on YouTube, you can go find his previous episodes. If you're on YouTube, there's a playlist called AI. You can find his previous episodes, and we will talk about your previous episodes. But first, can you define AI? And you can talk to me like I'm a PhD astrophysicist, or you can talk to me like me, and I'm not a PhD astrophysicist.
Yeah. So the term gets thrown around a lot. At its core, it's an umbrella term that just encompasses a bunch of different technologies that contribute to what we might think of as intelligence that we have created in a machine. A machine doing things that we would normally have to do with our brain, we're able to do at scale and at speed. Using technology. Again, unfortunately, it's just been used so many times that it really has just lost meaning. In the classical sense, the term, artificial intelligence, I think was coined in 1959. And we had our first neural networks, in the 60s. And here we are decades later, where people are like, oh, back when, OpenAI invented AI, and it's like, this is a misunderstanding just about the history of it. It's really important to kind of keep that in mind as we talk about it. So as much as I can, I try and narrow it down to hey, what aspect of AI are we talking about? What are the very concrete hooks of that definition that we can talk about for each use case, and stick to that. But yeah, generally speaking, artificial intelligence is any task that can be completed by a machine that would have otherwise been done by a human.
That was a perfect definition, and I'm really excited about that because that's going to make a great clip. Let's go. And once again, I don't even remember what these slides I put up. I put up a bunch of different stuff. I think Yes, this is what we had discussed. We're like, hey, what should we talk about in this episode? Because I think similar to talking about AI is talking for me, much of Future Signal is focused on AI and Bitcoin or AI and crypto, essentially focused more on Bitcoin. But there's so much to talk about in Bitcoin that I think sometimes you can get really lost in the sauce. And especially you can start to create content that maybe doesn't resonate and invite newer people in because there's all these acronyms, there's a lot of slang, there's jargon. Whenever you get any kind of community, jargon happens. And the US government is probably the best example. If you hang out with anyone who works around government, it's just impossible to understand what they're saying. So one of the things we wanted to talk about, and you were like, we need to put this on wax, right? Is the signal versus noise. And that is a huge part of Future Signal, is bringing on people that are going to talk about the signal amongst the noise. Because right now, for example, in Bitcoin, there's a bunch of noise about who Satoshi is, all these things. It's going to fail. It's still a scam, this, that, and the other. But the signal is that it's being adopted by nation states. It is being put on some of the biggest companies in the world on their balance sheets. High net worth individuals are selling real estate to get into Bitcoin. So I think it's always interesting to make sure you talk about the signal amongst the noise. So talk to me about some of the narratives right now that are noise in AI and that are probably misleading or misdirecting people when they think about AI.
Yeah, for sure. The best way that I can communicate what the noise is actually like one step removed from the noise, which is the incentives that lead to the noise.
Hmm.
And so like some of the incentives right now are, one, you should put AI in everything because that's where the money is, right? And so you have a lot of folks who are, claiming that it's in their product or it's in their company or it's in, their resume or whatever, who might not, fully understand exactly what it is that they're referring to or how it actually works. And so that kind of perpetuates the again the misnomer that has become AI, because you have the most prominent folks, talking to venture capitalists and talking to, investors, trying to define this term that don't really understand it. The issue is that the incentive is that, like, if you have that on your pitch deck, then you're probably going to get more money, right? And so it's this, like, never ending sort of loop where if you say you have AI, then you get more money, which means that you have more prominence in the market, despite the fact that you never really understood what AI was in the first place, or you haven't, like, properly incorporated it. So one incentive in the market right now is just that a lot of people are trying to fund AI, and I think that contributes to a lot of the noise. Two is that, like, I think that there is a lot of, folks on YouTube and podcasts and books that are being written and that sort of thing, again, by folks that might not fully understand, or maybe just don't really care to understand what's happening in the underlying technology, because for a similar reason, when they mention AI and they bring it up, they get more likes, they get more reposts, they get more things. And especially when it comes to, like, the sort of edge lords, the meme dudes who are like, AGI tomorrow, we're already being taken over by AI, those sorts of things. When you're a part of that hype cycle and you just, like, push it to the next frontier, again, you just get more engagement from your audience, right? So I think that there really is an incentive to just, like to be wrong about this, either deliberately or just coincidentally, which again contributes to the first point that I had, which is that AI has become a misnomer. So with those two incentives in place, I think that we just get a lot of hype. We get a lot of fake things out there, and it really, really makes it difficult to talk about some of these underlying concepts in a way that's, like, actually academic or, like, actually grounded in the science. So that's I think that's what contributes to the noise, which makes the signal much harder to reach.
We're about to be in and around the holiday season, Christmas season.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
know for me, maybe not with my family, and I'm kind of lucky because my family has heard me talk about Bitcoin now for 7 or 8 years, and my father has.
Yeah, it's so
It's so
annoying.
annoying, right?
Like, I cannot
My
tell
my
you.
father has bought in.
Yeah.
My sister gave me money back in the day, and I invested it for her, and she's super, excited to have some exposure. And my brother-in-law, the only thing he says to me now is, "Man, I wish I had gotten in when you told me at 15." And the reason why I bring that up is there's about to be a bunch of people from crypto and Bitcoin are going to be sitting around the family dinner table, and people are going to be like, what's going on? What's the noise? What is some of the noise you think you may get at your family table or just seeing friends? Even when I come over and hopefully I say hi to the fam, what are things that you've heard recently or like in the last 3 months? Because this is a space that you work in. And I think it's, as you've said, there's so much because it's something that when you just post on X or even this episode, we're kind of meta now because this is a podcast about AI, right? Even by posting this on the internet, there may be certain people that click on it just because they're like, ooh, AI, and the episode's called What We Get Wrong About AI. So they're like, okay, there's a little clickbait title. What are some of the things that you've heard recently in the last 3 months of someone, the FUD, right? We call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt. What's some of the FUD? What are some of the things that you've personally heard, maybe from a friend, maybe from an ex-colleague that's not that's not currently working where you are? Like what are the things you're hearing, and then how are you addressing those?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So a couple of big trends right now are one, AI doesn't work, right? Which again, like getting back to the original point, like it's tough to even know what people are talking about, right? When they say that. But usually what they mean is like ChatGPT isn't as great as we think it is, or some of these other chatbots or that sort of thing, right? And so like putting aside like just what I think is like a really poor definition of it. I think that when folks usually talk about that, again, it's usually to sell something and to be, part of the frontier of the conversation and like push the insanity a little bit, further towards the edge so that you're out front able to wave that flag. But two, I think that also it usually is just a demonstration that someone doesn't really know what they're talking about. Because when folks talk about AI not working, it usually means like, hey, I asked ChatGPT to like solve world hunger and it couldn't. And so like, wow, like you seriously, like y'all are so excited about this, right? Like when you have a few chats back and forth with a chatbot and it doesn't go like exactly the way that you want, that's not AI not working. That's like truly like you playing with a toy and like expecting it to be a Ferrari or something along those lines. Um, and so my big takeaway is like for, this is like a gross generalization, but like as someone who truly like spends like most days like building out agents that like will do things that otherwise wouldn't have been able to be done by humans, like um, when folks say AI doesn't work, it usually means they just don't know how to make AI work, right? And so that's a big thing that I, around the dinner table, that's something with my friends, with my family. Like it's not that AI doesn't work; it's just tough. We just need to define a better a little bit what you're referring to, and also just like what the tasks are, and then also having a third component, which is a practitioner who I think just understands better, how to actually solve that problem for you using technology.
You
Um, so that's yeah. Go ahead.
No, please continue.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like kind of thing number one. Like AI doesn't work. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I'm about to go to a slide where I show all the episodes that you've been on, but I realized based on what you just said, we meaning I, when I created this, I think I forgot to put in an episode because I think the first episode that you came on was called like AI isn't magic or something like that. And you just alluded to that
Yeah.
again. Once again, AI is only as good as and I'm digging to find it now while we're live here, but AI is only as good essentially as the person who's in charge of it, who's using it as a tool, which makes perfect sense. It goes back to the idea that like you
Right.
can,
Right.
yeah, like you can buy $300 shoes and cleats and and that's not going to make you messy. It just doesn't
Yeah.
translate.
Yeah. No, totally. And unfortunately, like the folks that sold you those cleats and those shoes
Great
or that
marketing.
car or whatever,
Great
like
marketing.
exactly. Like those are the folks that I was referring to in the previous point, which is like we're selling you this promise that like AI is going to solve all your problems, right? And the folks selling it, like they might actually believe it, right? Like they might truly believe it, and that only makes it worse because then when you do purchase and you get buyer's remorse and it doesn't, do everything in the world and more, then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I was sold a lie. I'm not stupid, ergo like AI is bad, right? And it's just like this weird sort of conversation that like an uninformed seller is having with an uninformed purchaser, and then that is what makes it onto Twitter and all of the other social media platforms where like this is a clear example that AI isn't working in general. And it's like, meanwhile, there's just so many folks in the industry who are like, out there who are actually pushing the conversation forward, who are like, sorry that you got duped, but like, that's kind of like the point, finding folks that can buy into it. And here we are, like actually making things work, right? And so that's really unfortunate, when folks do buy into the hype, and then are disappointed when it doesn't pay off. Like the issue here isn't AI. The issue here is getting swindled, and that's been happening for as long as we've been alive.
So to take the old adage of don't hate the player, hate the game, with AI, it's don't hate the game, it's hate the player.
Yeah, it's 100%. Like I mean, there's also like the field, right? I mean, again, to use the to push the metaphor, like, all right, there's Messi who's the player, there's soccer that's the game, but there's also the field, and like hey, like don't blame the soccer pitch because like you didn't get good seats that you bought from a scalper.
Mm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like we've got this industry that is doing just like incredible things, and I think folks will grab an artifact of that, whether it's their chatbot or whether it's their, personal device, like the rabbit, that is just like absolute, garbage, and then be upset about it. But in reality, people are doing great things and pushing the industry forward every single day, and that's unfortunately not what kind of makes it out into the world, into the media hype cycle as much as it should.
One of the, and I'm going to go to a slide in a second that talks about all the episodes that you've been on, but I do think that in my head, maybe it's not taking into account all the episodes that you've been on this podcast talking about AI. But one of the things I do think is the power of social media. People still sleep on it. And it surprises me because I think this past election, the last time you were on was pre-election, but I think this past election really showed how powerful social media is, how powerful influencers are, how powerful content creators
Mhm.
are, and how powerful each individual platform can be. And we just had an election where the candidate who went on Joe Rogan was elected, and the candidate who decided to not go on Joe Rogan wasn't elected. The candidate who went on podcasts that were on Rumble, which is basically a censorless podcast platform or content creation platform, was elected, but the one that didn't go wasn't elected. And we also just saw so much fake news and so much just stuff that wasn't real on about both candidates on both sides. That was just kind of pushed forward. And one of the things I see more and more from a media standpoint, and this is not something groundbreaking or you're not gonna be like, oh, that's crazy, man. Like you're the first one to think of this. We know that negative news travels so much more, gets so much more clicks,
Oh,
gets
for
so
sure,
much more likes.
for sure.
So I think if I think of like Paul Kruger, Paul Krugman, the financial guy from the New York Times. I can't think of his name right now, but for a long time,
Sure, Paul Bergman,
Paul,
Nobel laureate, Princeton, and is a columnist at the New York Times.
yes, thank you. For a long time, he and others in his mold would write articles, and I swear they would write articles just to shit on crypto or Bitcoin, just because they would get more clicks, because they would get clicks from both sides. People who believe that, and they're like, "Oh,
Interesting.
let this like affirm my bias," and then people like me who's like, oh man, what's he saying? Like, I need to understand the narrative. I need to understand what other people are saying. Like, it's always good to take things into your peripheral that don't align with your worldview. But I think with AI,
Yeah.
the stuff that I see is exactly what you said, and that is going to stick with me. You have people in and around AI that are uninformed sellers or they're uninformed marketers selling to people that are uninformed buyers. And that is so
Yeah.
freaking dangerous on every level. And behind that, you have billions of dollars of VC money that are just trying to get money into products and services that have AI. And I'm putting those in air quotes because, as you've said, sometimes they're not even like, can you break that down? Then now talk to me about that. Like, is there a product, and you don't necessarily need to call it out by name, but can you describe products you've seen out on the market right now that are just like not AI, but they say they're AI? So it's like, the sugar-free drinks, but they still have like sugar in them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll say one. So I was just at NeurIPS, which is one of the premier AI conferences, or it's a machine learning research conference that has really exploded over the last decade. It's about 17,000 people. We were just in Vancouver, And it's really focused on the research, but on the periphery, there were just a lot of folks who were, selling their idea or selling their product, or trying to get investment and that sort of thing. And so you would be having these conversations, whether it's in line waiting for an event, or at an after party, and then with a researcher and talking about like the fundamental aspects of what they're doing. And then like there would just be this sort of like creep in of like someone who's trying to sell you something, and they're kind of weaving their narrative into what is actual fundamental research, but is trying to deviate it to, hey, like, you should buy my thing. um and it was just so blatant that they didn't know what was actually happening underneath the hood. And that, like, the AI, to your point, that they were selling was actually just like, oh, it's a normal app, but then we have an endpoint to OpenAI that we send all your data to, and then we get it back, and then we use that to like inform like two decisions, downstream, and like that's an AI app, right? Um, and so again, I won't call anyone out by name, but like in those moments, I really just felt like I don't know, maybe it's something that I need to talk to a therapist about or something. But it felt like a freeloader in the conversation, and like it's difficult to let that go. And so you pursue it and you say, well, tell me more about the AI. Tell me more about the AI. Like, it what exactly. And end of the day, it's just an API call to OpenAI to kind of like get a little bit of feedback about. And so we're seeing that all over the place. The term that a lot of people use are just API wrappers. And so if you have OpenAI or Claude, or any of the other Gemini, where you just kind of build X, whether it's a real estate platform, or a friend finder platform, or whatever. And then you just kind of wrap it, like it's just a wrapper around like calling endpoints like OpenAI or ChatGPT specifically. Then that is something that's just, it's going to fail, and it's going to disappoint a lot of people as it burns up in flames.
You've mentioned OpenAI a couple times, and OpenAI obviously continues to, at least in my opinion, be the elephant in the room when it comes to AI, retail AI, which is what I say. You can't spell retail without
Yeah.
AI. You can steal that from me if you'd like. And
Wow, did you come up with that
it
yourself?
just came to me.
That's really
It just came to me. Yeah, patent
wow.
that. I patent
Jay,
that
that's
IP.
incredible.
But one of the things that has happened since we last talked, because I think when we hang out, I try not to talk to you about AI as much, because it's like one of my buddies, Corey, if you're listening to this, he's a PT. And since he got his doctorate in physical therapy, like everyone comes out the woodwork, like, oh, my hamstring, oh, my hip, oh, my ankle, and
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
and I personally, and I'll say this on mic, I don't mind when some people talk to me. Like, I'm in a chat with three people. We used to be the Not Crypto Bro show. If they want to talk to me about crypto or Bitcoin, I'll talk to them all day, because like, they're asking questions, and and like they're teaching me and we're learning. But my point is, I don't really love all the time when people come up to me now, especially with Bitcoin in and around 100K, and they're just like only asking me about Bitcoin. So I try to,
No, but that's
yes, so I try to avoid
yeah. No,
asking
sorry
you.
to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I try to avoid asking you only about AI when we're together, or we're not talking about this stuff. But one of the things I've been dying to ask you, now that I have you on mic, is OpenAI potentially not being a nonprofit anymore, because I feel
Mhm.
like it started as a nonprofit, and it started as this Sam Altman dream, this utopian dream of having open source AI. Like, that's why it's called open AI, right? So it's supposed to be open source. It's closed source. It started as a nonprofit, and now they're going to go into for profit. I just feel like that doesn't, it's so far removed in such a short amount of time from what it was supposed to be. I can't imagine where it's going to be in 2 years. And we've just passed November 30th, 2024 was its 2-year anniversary since launch. And I just wonder, okay, all right, where's it going to be in November 30th, 2026? So I kind of wanted to ask you thoughts just in general about OpenAI, its development, its trajectory, because you were just talking about everyone just API and using it a wrapper. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So one thing I'll say is that, like, I always like talking about AI, which is actually a problem. So if you want me to, like, maybe the equivalent is like like, hey Andy, will you help build me this AI app? Would be like the equivalent of for you, like, hey, can you help me with my investments as it relates
Sure,
to
sure.
crypto?
This is true.
But
This is
truly,
true though,
like,
and
you
yeah,
know
and
what
I'm
I'm
going to cut you off.
saying?
This is true because I like to talk about the philosophies of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin
Yes,
could do.
yes.
Like, there's one thing about Bitcoin when it comes to war, and it's like if all countries were on a Bitcoin standard and they couldn't print their own money, then they probably couldn't go to war as easily because they just can't make more of this. Therefore, they would actually have to get citizen
Bold
buy-in.
claims.
They would actually have to get citizen buy-in
Bold
and not
claims,
just go
Jay.
spend $300 million in Afghanistan for 20 years and debase the currency of the people in the U.S. While
Billion, but yeah.
billion, it was 300 million a day.
You said
No,
300 million. Oh, okay,
yeah,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
300
yeah.
million a
Okay, got
day,
it,
which
got it.
comes out to the 20 trillion they spent. Anyways, the point
Yeah,
is,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I love talking about that. I love talking about the what ifs and what Bitcoin maybe could do and the problems it solves. Talking to people about how to go to Coinbase and create an account, I'm like, guys, it's there. Like you know how to,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
similar thing of me maybe
100%.
coming to you and be like, Andy, can you help me build this AI app to whatever? Okay.
No, totally. And the other aspect of it is like AI gossip, like where it's like the hot off the press. That sort of stuff. That sort of stuff is like I have a hard time with it. So like when the whole Sam Altman firing thing and like
Mm.
all the OpenAI drama, like it was gripping. Like it was like wow, like what's happening? But mostly from just like a what impact does this have on the industry? But like so many of the channels that I've been consuming for a while, whether it's on Reddit or whether it's on Blue Sky now or whatever, they're just like screenshots of like two people in AI like posting to each other, and it's like, did you see like this person's clap back to this other person? And I'm like, I have no patience for this like whatsoever, you know what I mean? And so unfortunately, again, it's like I think that's what people think of when they think of AI, and it's like, yeah, it needs to be toned down and just kind of like focus on the actual technology, right? And so unfortunately, I think that is like what's happening with OpenAI. It's like it's this, like you said, it's the elephant in the room. And whenever that happens, then like all of a sudden there are rumors and there are conspiracies and there are levels of mysticism, right? There was this whole thing that came out, what was a year ago, where like the ChatGPT API was slower during December. And it was like, well, that's because like the AI was like inferring that like, oh, it's December, which is like when humans take a break. So like I should take a break. And it's like, and like even like research papers were devoted to this. And so like I haven't read everything. I'm not just like 100% negating like all claims that have ever been made in that neighborhood, but like guys, like we are like ascribing agency to like a static Excel
Guys,
spreadsheet, like on which we do, you know what I mean? Like there's like some serious mysticism that kind of happens there. So like setting that aside, that like it's fun to gossip, like I get that, but like setting that aside, like if we just try and look like a little bit more concretely of like, hey, what are the actions that we're seeing in OpenAI? Like let's look at it from that perspective. I think that's fine. Um, OpenAI, like you said, there's been rumors and rumblings that we're moving towards, a for-profit model. I think it's understandable because that's the trend in the industry. I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars of future revenue, and it would be, pretty odd if folks didn't, want to, be a part of that like level of generational wealth, even at like the staff employee level. But it is just disappointing, right? I mean, it started out under certain pretenses and, started to devolve, I think, into kind of the standard kind of, tech company way of thinking, which is like growth at all costs. And the sort of like prisoner's dilemma dynamics of like if we don't do it then someone else will. And venture capital. I just see that their user experience is like very much favoring the enterprise, very much favoring the folks that are going to be willing to pay $10,000 a month, at the expense of the users. I think a lot of people see this as like the classic sort of enshittification of the internet, right? To use like Cory Doctorow's term. And we're seeing that at OpenAI, which is like it's just really disappointing, I think, for a lot of folks to see a company that did start out with such ideals kind of devolve into that. But end of the day, it's like they do need tens of billions and soon hundreds of billions, like truly hundreds of billions of dollars to train these models and to operate these models. And so the other question is like, well, how would you do that, under a nonprofit sort of organization, right? And so like I think that those two forces are kind of that's where the tension is, right? It's like how do we build something that like truly there isn't enough energy on the planet yet to power the models and the infrastructure within like an ecosystem of people around the world who are using this stuff to actually make it happen, while being sort of like a nonprofit, hey, we're super focused on this. And so I think that that is sort of like the narrative that is currently playing out right now. um, One addition to that narrative that I'll say, so like that's kind of the classic. What I would say is like, how we might consider it. One addition to that narrative that I'll say is that like there is just so much nonsense that is coming out in defense of OpenAI, where it's like, oh, did you know that like Sam Altman, he doesn't have any shares in OpenAI. Like how dare you even suggest that he would have like personal, interest in what's happening next? And it's like when Sam Altman went to France, Macron came to him. Like when Sam Altman goes to Russia, when he goes to the like this person has more power than most sitting dignitaries around the world. Like any investment that he makes is matched 10,000, 1 million fold just because he's in the room. Like to say that this person doesn't have a financial incentive that's based on the success of OpenAI is like it's just to again just to not understand how power dynamics work in the world. And so we have to consider, like, yeah, that when people are talking about intelligence at this level, that does impact an industry, across the world, we have to consider that, like, there are billions of dollars flowing through this thing that are important for training, but there are billions of dollars that are also like making yachts and like making like, not only yachts, but like shipyards, like specifically for the people that are in charge of this. And, we have to consider that capitalist lens as we think through like, oh, is OpenAI good or bad, right?
Wow. You just said so many things. And one of the things that like came to me was I think that in the world, people think that if you work at a nonprofit, it means that you are inherently benevolent. And that
Sure.
actually, you may have a benevolent mission. There may be a good vision. There's probably a great website. For my past history of working in development work, you'll see all these websites and they just have kids from all around the world and they're smiling and it's like, donate, and they have budgets of, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million. Some of those people that work, I don't know, I just want to pull the veil back also off the idea of a nonprofit, because I think people think that like all nonprofits are run well and like done in a good way. And there's a lot of nonprofits where, just because it says nonprofit, that doesn't mean that you don't pay yourself a salary of $600,000 a year. Fly around Central
Sure.
America
Which isn't
in
necessarily a
helicopters.
bad
No,
thing,
it's not. It's not. I'm not saying it's a bad thing either.
right?
I'm just
Like,
saying that I think when someone
yeah,
says, "Hey, I work for a nonprofit," the assumption is you work for
yeah,
forty
yeah, yeah.
thousand dollars a year. You're scraping by, and you're taking it on the chin because you're doing good for the world. I think that that's like the idea, and I think it's not like that. But yeah.
Right, right, for sure. And so, yeah, 100%. The other aspect of it is that, like, just to be clear, like OpenAI, currently, and it's a little nebulous as to how much this is actually enforced, but like currently, the idea is that there's a nonprofit board that oversees the for-profit company, right? So OpenAI is not a nonprofit, right? There's just a governance structure in place that goes that flows through a nonprofit board. But here's the issue: is that when you have a nonprofit board that takes an action that the rest of the company doesn't like, and the rest of the company truly, like the rest of the company, threatens to quit. Right, if you remember that, during the
Mhm.
whole firing saga, they all went to Twitter and to X, and the whole thing were like, OpenAI is nothing without its people. Like, so there's a structure in place where the nonprofit board is in charge, but like the nonprofit board is not in charge. You know what I mean? Like, so like there's in theory and there's in practice, and in practice, like, yeah, we've jumped the shark and we are no longer in the world of nonprofit as it relates to OpenAI, and that's true for a lot of different companies. Again, I'm not making a judgment one way or the other. because I think that it's a nuanced topic. But like we do need to consider some of these market forces that are happening in the reality of the situation, rather than like take to Twitter and be like, "How dare you insult my godhead?" This person who runs this company or this person who runs that company. It's like let's look at the economics here and realize that this is not a nonprofit organization anymore.
Yeah. Well, I've been dying to ask you that, and like I said, I'm not trying to take advantage of you as being my quote my AI guy. You know, some people have drywall guys.
Andy
They've got
GPT, I'm in. Just send
Andy
me a text. I'll
GPT.
respond.
Some people have tile guys. I have Andy. These are the episodes previously that you've come on. So episode 76. And these are also numbers that go back to the previous brand of this podcast, which was called More Than Blockchain. But one was AI is developing at a lightning pace. AI adaptability is today's superpower. 2024 is the year of AI agents and companions. And then there's the lost episode, which was all my fault because apparently I don't know how to do anything with audio. And now I hope you're really excited. And I
You
actually,
have to be a Patreon subscriber to get that one.
yeah, that's deep in the lore. And
You have to give us $1 million.
I was gonna say it's
Yeah.
$1,000 a month, paid in Bitcoin. I'm now going to show you images. I'm excited to show you because I didn't know how else to explain some of these things. But for episode 76, AI is developing at a lightning pace. Don't you love that? I know that this, if you're watching this, just this image just does it for you.
What is this?
Do you remember what this is? This is this is an
The
analogy that
deer.
I use often to explain how fast AI was using that you brought up on that first episode. Because I remember being like, Andy, like, explain to me how fast AI is moving, right? Because one of the things that I think with new technology, no matter what it is, even internet adoption, it's just like it's hard for people to wrap their head around. I think social media adoption was also something else. You said earlier in this episode, you're like, look, many people think OpenAI is AI. Like it was invented on November 30th, 2022. And I have to say, many people in the world who I've met, their entire internet is just Facebook. They don't have a browser. They're just in Facebook. So it's a similar, like, that's a, but you said on the episode 76, if people want to go back and listen to it, I think you should. I think there's some evergreen principles and concepts you shared about AI in that. You said humans can't understand this because from this angle, if we're hunting the deer, right? And the deer goes behind linearly. We know if it's running 20 miles per hour, maybe it exceeds to 25 in that short amount of time. And we're going to be able to track it and shoot it. Okay. This is like, humans hunting with bow and arrows thousands of years ago. But you're saying we see the deer go behind the fence and this is how fast it's moving. I'm just kind of giving a recap to where we've been. And you're saying it comes out in the other end and it's going 4,000 miles per hour. And we actually don't even see it. It's just gone. Because we can't like possibly comprehend that. So I just wanted to bring that up. I thought you would love this visual. It's so simple. This is the other one that I kind of mentioned to you the other day, because this is how I feel like, as someone who's not living and breathing and working in AI, I feel like it's gone from, even since the launch of OpenAI when they created it in November 30th, 2022. I feel like it's gone from even a donkey then to a rocket ship, because now something we haven't talked about, but maybe we could talk about now, is video. Video is ridiculous now. Voice has been good for about a year from what I've seen in certain AI things. But the video with Sora that just came out the other day, some of the other video is absolutely incredible. And actually, I forgot to put the pictures up here on this, but I wanted to show you what Brian Naughton had brought on the first episode of Future Signal, where he had the different images, and I'm sure I could go find that while we talk, and I'll bring that up. But he had the images of the slow development of Albert Einstein, which actually I can bring up. I'll have to go off camera for a sec, or like go play around with it.
Yeah. Pull it up.
Yeah. I'll pull it up.
Albert Einstein is a generated image.
Yeah. It's all done with Midjourney.
No,
please
totally.
talk, and I'll be here and doing some side projects.
Yeah, that sounds great. So you asked me before, like, what are the trends in AI, or like the sort of the signals that are happening right now, and what I said was that people are saying that AI doesn't work, right? And we've discussed that. The second one that I think is like more prominent is like AI is slowing down, right? And every time I hear this, again, false definitions aside, but like every time I hear this, I'm just like like how could you possibly say that? Like it's like it's bizarre to me that anyone would think that, right? Like they usually cite metrics, and that tends to be based on benchmarks, and benchmarks are really fraught with logical
Hmm.
inconsistencies. And there's a lot that we can talk about using benchmarks as a way to actually understand the progress of AI. But like, I think that again, people will cherry pick certain examples where they might be chatting with ChatGPT and it does something stupid, or um, there will be an image that gets generated and the hands look really bad,
Hmm.
or some of the sort of low hanging fruit examples kind of jump on that and say like, see, I told you, like AI is we had all this hype, but now like the bubble is bursting, and AI is slowing down, right? AI is doing anything but. Again, pick your metric, and you might see a gradual decline in return on investment, but that's kind of a classic S curve as like certain benchmarks get saturated. But end of the day, like the frontier AI labs, as well as the second, third, fourth tier labs, are doing things every single day, every single hour sometimes, that are pushing the industry forward and making amazing progress as they do it. And the most important thing to see is that like that progress is speeding up. Your ability to discern between images might be slowing down. How you feel about the text responses that you're getting from this magical intelligence in the sky is might be slowing down. But like end of the day, the folks that are at the fire who are like pushing this stuff forward, it is 100% speeding up.
Okay, a TLDR maybe of what you just said at the end there is that it's speeding up so fast that we can't comprehend it because humans can't speed up like AI can speed up.
Well, so I think that's an extrapolation on it, but yeah, I mean, we have a hard time seeing that it's speeding up. I think again because we're in this sort of like noisy ecosystem of like freeloaders and charlatans, who are pushing their
Mm.
products and trying to sell their books, and some of them are hype folks and some of them are doomers, and we're latching onto one or the other. But like end of the day, if you look at the model development, if you look at the system development, if you look at the product development, like we are fastly, like very quickly, we are increasing the velocity. Not just like the speed isn't just continuing to ramp. Like the speed at which the speed is increasing is increasing. And that sort of compounding exponential factor is like it's truly mind blowing. Like as a practitioner in the space.
Those are those things that I think are really hard to comprehend. Something my father often says is it's so hard for him to comprehend that the the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light or something like that. And the speed of light is something that most humans it's really hard to actually comprehend. And I also think the other thing about velocity and speed of anything increasing, you're saying and we talked about this actually off mic, but the slope, right, is that speed is all relative, right?
Hmm.
It's all relative. And I was watching a video the other day of a astronaut, and he was out on the US space station, and he was talking about some things that people don't understand about when you're doing the moonwalk. He's like, well, first of all, you're not moonwalking. A lot of it is you're holding on. And he's
Hmm.
like, was talking about how when your arms get really tired. And he was like, if you've ever been rock climbing and you haven't done it in a while, your forearms are going to get so roasted in the first 20 minutes that you're going to get worried because then you get like this jaw, like this claw where you can't grab, and you just feel so weak, even though you're not, because the rest of you is fine. You just don't use these, we are all essentially monkeys and we don't swing by trees anymore. Anyways, he brought this up because he's like, when you see these pictures of me hanging off the US space station, he's like, I'm going 1,700 miles per hour.
Hmm.
But in our relative thing with the earth behind it, it seems like nothing. It's just like when you're in a plane, you're going 600 miles per hour, but you look down, you're like, dude, this thing is slow. So I think our
Right.
perception of speed is often thrown off just by, I don't know, I want to say human nature. But I wanted to bring this
Right.
image up. Yeah.
But if I could, so there's a
Please, please,
great
please, please.
Great Radio Lab episode. It's a
Yep.
replay, but it just came out again, and they were talking to one of the folks, the astronauts was talking exactly that. But when you're in a particular orbit and you're
Hmm.
seeing the Earth, he talks about how because the sunsets and sunrises at that speed will happen. I think he said like every 45 minutes or something like that.
Wow.
He was talking about how seeing the Earth in complete darkness, you can't see it at all. It's actually the absence of stars is what he sees, right? Because of like the
He
exact position of,
just
of,
sees
of where the sun
black.
was.
Black.
exactly, just black. Where like there's like a surrounding blanket of stars, and then just like an abyss, right? But because of the distance that he was at and the position of the sun and like the whole thing, instantaneously the sun illuminated the entire Earth, right?
In a
And so
snap of a
this
second.
feeling,
And it,
snap
yeah.
of a second, and this feeling of just overwhelming vertigo took over him. Like we're talking like a person who has trained their entire life to be in a situation like this, all of a sudden was like, I'm thousands of miles up, I'm falling, I'm going to die, right? And like 1 second you're just sitting there and you're like, oh yeah, like I bet the sun's gonna rise, and then like you're looking at a glowing fireball that's gonna consume you, and you're like, I'm gonna die, right? And so that sort of thing is like when you have someone who is that trained, who is that specialized in their field, who has like, been out on like spacewalks all this time, have such a visceral reaction that is like akin to vertigo, that is vertigo. That's what I think people are coming into terms with in artificial intelligence as well. We have all of the data that suggests we are headed towards a sunrise, and it's going to be here, and we've all thought about it, and it's going to be, beautiful, and like this whole thing. I think when it hits, we are all going to be absolutely terrified at the just great expanse of like imagery and visuals and interactions and capabilities that hit us like a tidal wave all at once. And really, we know that we're moving 1,700 miles an hour, and it's happening very slowly, like truly, but relative to our position, it's going to feel like an absolute tidal wave when it happens. And I think that we're seeing little glimpses of that today. Maybe a few of us have like a mirror in our pocket and kind of anticipate like the fireball that's coming. But like end of the day, I think that it's going to hit, and I think that it's going to hit in 2025.
You think it's going to hit in 2025?
I think every single person that is tuned into this conversation, in whether we call it the Western world or this socioeconomic niche, like that is following this sort of stuff pretty closely, will have that moment of AI vertigo in 2025.
Well, obviously that was going to be a low-hanging fruit follow-up is when do you think this is going to happen? But you said 2025. And let me just backtrack a little bit, because I think throughout our lives, and we're roughly the same age, we're millennials, things that you can look back and be like, oh my gosh, why did everyone not see Facebook happening?
Right.
Oh my gosh, how did we not possibly see the opportunity for people to just work anywhere because they have an internet connection? And that's the same as them sitting in an office if they're also going to be at their computer. And now we can have a crazy diverse workforce because we can pull in talent from all over the world, where we used to put up a job poster and you either live there or you had to move there, which, limited our ability to get different type of minds in the office. When I think about Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin has been around now for 15 years. And for some of us, it's always been obvious. But I think even Bitcoin, as the example, there won't be that moment. There won't be that vertigo moment where it hits them, just like you've said, where the astronaut, all of a sudden it goes from pitch black to a fireball, essentially, because of the speed of light. You're saying that happens in 2025. And now I don't necessarily even want to know when it happens in 2025, because I just want to be surprised when the asteroid hits the Earth, But what does it look like, right? And let me give you the Bitcoin example. The Bitcoin example, for me, if all of a sudden that were to just happen, like a snap of a finger, is all of a sudden every single country on the planet is stacking Bitcoin. They're selling their gold to buy Bitcoin. And no matter where I go, I can use Bitcoin. That's what it would be like instantaneously. So and sorry, I just have to use Bitcoin because that's my relative to understand the speed, right? Speed is only relative. Like as they say, if you go in the woods, if you see a bear, you just have to run faster than the other person you're hiking with, right? What does that look like? What's the vertigo? When am I going to call you freaking the F out because I've just, like the astronaut, gone from pitch black to all of a sudden a massive, light?
Yeah, for sure. So two things. One is when we make the jump from bits to atoms. That's the big thing that a lot of people are focusing on. Where today we have ChatGPT, it's in a window, we talk to it, we get some recipe ideas, and like, oh, whoops, you accidentally told me to have 6,000 pounds of butter. I think what you meant was 600 grams. I'm gonna figure it out. We're pretty firmly in the bits world. When we move to the atoms world, that is when ChatGPT on our behalf can take actions in the physical world. And that is when that's when things will change dramatically. So for example, when we say, hey, ChatGPT, get me this recipe, but rather we say, hey, ChatGPT, can you buy me a book that has some of these recipes, and it shows up at our door, right? That's kind of the low hanging fruit, and it's like, oh cool, it read through all of our chat history, and it knew that I really liked this particular author, and that I had struggled with this in the past, that sort of thing. That's kind of the low hanging fruit, and I think that that's what we're going to get to, especially with our ad driven ecosystem, right? But then take it another step further, where it's like, hey, ChatGPT, can you sue this person for me? Right? Like, sure. Like, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna take a look at our chat history, and I'm gonna understand, what you're going through, and I'm gonna also have all your your phone call transcripts, and like, I'm gonna see that like you talked to this person, you were at their house, you slipped and fell. I'm gonna take a look at this person's own history because I have access to that as well. I'm gonna see that they've actually been sued before for the same reason. And I know a lawyer. I'm going to call this lawyer. I'm going to tell that I'm in a chatbot, but that doesn't matter because I have $1,000 in Bitcoin that you gave me, to do these sorts of things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? When we are actually able to interact with the physical world in the same, I'm sorry, when these agents are able to interact with the physical world in the same way that we do as humans, that's going to be such a transformative moment for people when one, they are totally surprised that that's possible, and two, they are totally understanding of the power of that, right? And so, this is a sort of classic storytelling, narrative where like the best part of any movie is the ending because it's one, surprising, and two, inevitable, right? And so we're going to see that on the AI quote unquote level, with these agents that can take actions on our behalf in the physical world. And I think that that's going to just be absolutely transformative for the world at large. Whereas today we are stuck firmly in the world of bits, we will very quickly move to the world of atoms, and I think that that's when we're going to really have an impact. And I think that's going to happen in 2025.
Wow, geez. You talked about that on one of the previous episodes, basically that when you're probably going to have two AI agents that are working with lawyers but fighting one another potentially in the future over whatever case. You
Mhm.
got in a car crash
Right.
and you have Geico insurance, and maybe that Geico insurance, they have their AI agent fighting the other person's insurance over whatever it is.
Sure.
That's, gosh, that's a whole different thing. I hope that,
Sure.
yeah.
But yeah. No, but think about all the times that you would have used that in the last 18 months, right? I mean, we talk about having screenshots on our phone of things that injured us. We're just, kind of, but imagine just being able to say like, hey, like a screenshot of every single person that I've interacted with on social media, like find their LinkedIn, write them a message that is like, industry specific, stroke their ego a little bit, send that message on my behalf. And then if they respond, set up a meeting and just put it on my calendar, right? You're going to have over the next month, a month of meetings with people that you would not have otherwise spoken to, that you would not have otherwise been able to connect to. And guess what? They're going to be doing the same thing as a receiver of those messages. And so we're going to have like two humans show up in a room because AI told them to, right? I mean, think about that. Like we're our entire lives, sorry, entire lives. I'm speaking like very, in an exaggerated way, kind of for the point of the conversation. But like, if you think about those interactions as having been like set up and governed by an agent that like a for-profit company is selling to you, that to me is where we start to get into some really, really funky worlds that I again I just don't think people are ready for.
I was just going to say, I hope that the image of a donkey and a rocket on the screen doesn't dumb down this conversation, but it almost feels salient because what you're saying right now is the donkey is us asking for the recipe, the vegan recipe, so I can have that at Christmas. But what you're saying is the rocket is when I ask for the recipe and somehow it clicks into Amazon and it has that 2-hour shipping, and I hear the doorbell and I have a book now and I'm
Yeah.
cooking.
Yeah, and it has a note like from your
Oh
chatbot that's like, "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Like, I just got this for you." You know what I
God.
mean? And it's like, "Cool, that's great." So those are the 2 points that I was going to make. So one is the bits to atoms. That transition is, well, like I said, in 2024, we're moving into the world of agents. I think that 2025 will be about that transition where it can take it can take actions for you in the physical world. That is the name of the game in 2025. So that's kind of point number one. But then point number two is going to be the ubiquity, right? And so we have these agents that can take actions on our behalf. But then the second aspect of that is just the fact that there will be, I don't think in 2025, maybe not even in 2026, but certainly in the next 3 years, we will have billions, billions of agents in this world that have that are capable of doing things, that are actually capable of like taking action out there in the world, and they're existing on their own without people necessarily having to tell them what to do, tell them when to stop, tell them when to eat or sleep or adhere to certain social norms, but they will kind of have their own agency, as it were. And we're talking about tens of billions. So when we have that bits to atoms transition and we have that ubiquity, I think that the world really will look like a different place. And again, I'm speaking mostly about like our little socioeconomic niche, folks that are out there in the world who aren't, interacting with technology much. And I don't mean to say that everyone, everywhere is going to be dealing with this, but for sure, a great deal of our interactions every single day will be with artificial intelligence through these means.
Andy, this is why I bring you on, because I don't even know what to say after 95% of the stuff you say. But let me show you.
Right.
Let me show you. Well, actually, before we move forward, I want to stay on this, and I know that we have about 30 minutes left, and I need to let you get back to your life. What are the worries about what you've just said? And more specifically, are you going to be employing these agents to do all these things, to tap into your Bitcoin, to tap into your bank account, to make sure they have access to your Google Calendar, which then could have access to your email? What are the worries? Because for me, moving forward, I woke up this morning and I was only thinking about cybersecurity. And actually, the guest that I'll have on next week, we're going to be talking about cybersecurity. So I'm just, yeah, run me through that. Like, yes, this is all really exciting, but for me, it seems like there's crazy amount of attack vectors once you let an OpenAI, for example, a private company, be able to do all these things and dip into all these accounts that you have, whether it's information like your email or it's financial like your bank account.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, I mean, you know me, I'm a privacy nerd, and I like to proselytize about that a lot, and I think that that's an issue. I'll say that like most prominent for me isn't so much like the privacy or security aspect. It's just that we will have humans in our own lives who are very willing to concede control over their everyday existence to a system that, one, they don't understand, and two, does not care about them, right? So we will say like very quickly, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to worry about like suing this person. Like, yeah, heck yeah, go for it. And like we will say, do your thing, whichever platform we happen to be using, right? Or, if I don't have to worry about like getting my dry cleaning, or, if I never have to sit on a customer service call again, those sorts of things. One example, so this came up at NeurIPS actually. So there's a lot of people who are doing work on, how do we sort of align these agents from a perspective of like being a single being within an environment where like the tragedy of commons is possible, right? So this is when, all beings or all agents within that environment are being self-centered. They're just getting what they need, and so the benefit, it actually goes to those who are going to take as much as possible, right? Because there's no benefit to cooperating, right? Or that's a very like gross generalization about the tragedy of the commons. But how do we sort of see that happening with AI? Well, I want to go to dinner tonight. I don't tell the agent, how to do that, right? So this is the difference between like a declarative request versus an imperative request, where a declarative request is one where like I just know what I want the result to be, and I want to have a reservation at a restaurant that I like. Well, if I just set my agent to do that, well, then the agent is going to make 1,000 reservations for me at 1,000 different restaurants, and then be like, hey, do you like Chinese? And I'm like, oh yeah, I love that place. Like, thanks so much. And then not cancel the other 999, right? And if you think about it, like everyone's going to be doing that. And then as a result, like no restaurants can take reservations, right? And so this is just like sort of a comical example, but like you can think of that as like, what if our court system feels that we, is under that sort of stress, right? What if our education system is under that sort of stress? Or what if our financial system is under that sort of stress? Because we have these like very self-centered like, hey, I'm a product and I need to do the best that I can. And so other folks that are in this space, as a chatbot that's acting on my behalf, we're gonna quickly start to have some of these like standard ways of doing things breaking down, right? And so again, like privacy is one thing, security is another thing, but like really, it's like what happens when I request something of an agent and it goes out and does it, and it actually does it in a way that is like highly maligned to like social structures, and everyone is doing it, like things really start to break down. So that's what I'm mostly concerned about, and I think that like folks don't see that. Like I think that like again with the AI hype bros and the folks who don't really understand it, it's like oh what you think AI is going to take over like Terminator 2, like walk me through how like Terminator 2 happens. And it's like, bro, like if you have an agent who is like basically omniscient and omnipotent to make reservations at restaurants, like you better believe that the restaurant scene the world over is going to suck like a lot more. Like don't talk to me about Skynet. Like let's just look at like when has there been an example of a product that works better than any other product in a way that gets their users a benefit that hasn't ultimately been to the detriment of the ecosystem as a whole? Like name just a few of those products and I'll back off. But like I'm not thinking of it as Terminator. Like I'm very much thinking of it as just like a practical, like the open market is just a shittier place because we have these like self-centered capable agents acting on people's behalf.
When you gave the restaurant example, it's salient. And I think for me, as someone, I travel a lot these days, I could be like, hey, I want to go on a vacation. And like you said, it doesn't say anything, but it knows where I've been. So maybe it buys a flight, it gets me a seat on 10
Mhm.
different airlines. If, like you said, there's a billion chatbots out there doing that for people, all of a sudden no one can buy tickets who's not using these. And then I think we just get into a game theory where then I guess everyone's using them, which is kind of what happened with the internet. If you're not using the internet now in some way in your business, I actually don't know a business that won't benefit from the internet on any level. I don't care if you're just a
Right,
grave, a,
right.
a local grave creator of granite in a small town in Ohio. You're probably actually going to be better by having an Instagram, right? Like you
Oh,
wouldn't. It's not
100%.
going to
Yeah.
hurt you. Anyways, we've got some slides I want to run through, and some of them will make sense. But this is the slide that Brian Naughton had shared. He made all of these with Midjourney, and every time there was an update,
Yeah.
from left to right, this is what it did. And he used, I'm pretty sure, the same prompt, and it's night and day. It is speeding up,
Yeah.
right? And anyways, I just wanted to kind of show
Right.
you.
But we want to see also like the dates of this, right? So
Yes.
we see the development, but I'm guessing that the first one was probably Midjourney 1, like maybe 1.5, and then 2, 3, 4. Let's just call it 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember that like the time between those generations was first a year, then it was 6 months, then it was 3 months, then it was 9, then it was 45 days, right? And it's like, again, it's not about the speed that things are developing, it's the speed at which the development is increasing. And that compounding effect is just so massive.
It's the slope for take everyone back to whatever they learned that. This is something I
Yeah.
just posted here. And once again, none of these slides make sense. I'm sorry. I I'm so overwhelmed by AI sometimes when I think about it. It's hard for me to even create a good structure for thinking about having you on because there's just so many directions we can go in. But I saw this tweet and I wanted to share it with you because this goes back to the episode that we talked about, that being AI adaptable or being adaptable to AI is a new superpower. And I love this. The new and valuable traits are taste, insight and intuition, and resilience. And it says technology has turned roughly everything else into a commodity. And it goes on. And this was the quote tweet that was above it. I don't know if you can read it, but it said, many will disagree, but this is the type of person you need to be if you don't want to be replaced by AI. And it's a picture of Rick Rubin meditating, likely in his home. And I don't know if you've ever seen a tour of Rick Rubin's home. You need to go see it. It is like, I love it. But anyways, that was the response to this, that the new and valuable traits are taste, intuition, and
Yeah.
resilience.
And I think that that's true. I mean, a lot of people, a few quotes are like you better be prepared for the cost of intelligence to go to zero. Like, what does your business look like? What does your life look like? Right. I'm not sure about zero. I mean, like the point is there though, right? What happens when we have these intelligent, capable beings that can do stuff on our behalf, and how does your world look? If you can go back,
Yep. I go back.
the other thing is like based on that, it's like I think that we're also seeing that as these systems get better at answering questions, humans are improving in their ability to ask the questions, right? And so we're talking about taste, we're talking about insight, we're talking about intuition. Where again, I'm not here talking about like, oh, AI is just going to make everything a utopia, like quite the opposite, right? But I am saying that like the direction that humans have and the ability to guide what we might think of as like a long-tailed problem or exploration and say like, oh, you messed up here, let's ask this question differently, and that sort of thing, and actually guiding that. I think that that is a skill that people really need to understand, that still is very much an asset for us, and I hope that we can kind of continue with it in the future.
1000%. Just want to go through because I think we have some other interesting slides that I want to share with you. Anyways, I wanted to share this Rick Rubin thing. I saw it, I saved it on Twitter, and I was like, I thought this was pretty good. Oop. Let me go back. This, and I don't know if this is zoomed in enough, so we may need to change our view over here for people to see. But this was something that I had pulled off that you had said, can you share this and can we talk about it? So
Oh, cool.
do you want to dive into this?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to talk about like ARC in general?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And we don't have enough time maybe to go down that, but if you come on next, we can dive into that. But I do think breaking down this visual will be good because I think what you've just talked about is it's not the speed at which it's say it again. It's the slope, basically. It's the speed at which the speed is increasing. It's the increase into the increase of speed, which I think is tough for people to wrap
Yeah,
their heads
yeah.
around.
So
Yeah.
right. So just, I mentioned before, like the S curve of a standard benchmark, I mean, this is, I think, intuitive for a lot of people where like, if I put in, X amount of effort to get a B in my college class or in my, elementary school, whatever, like, then it would, in order to get an A, I might have to put in 1.5x amount of effort, right? Or maybe 2x, right? Like depending on the class or whatever, it's maybe it's twice as hard to increase your letter grade from a B to an A. But to go from an A plus, from an A to an A plus, it's actually, 4x harder, right? Or and then to go from like a 98 to a 99%, it's 10x harder or 20x harder, right? And so I think that like it gets harder as you approach sort of the limit, right? And so that's what we're seeing with a lot of these benchmarks, where you might have a model that gets 50%, and that's great, and then you'll get a model that gets 70%, and that's wow, that's incredible. But then like as you approach 90%, it just gets harder and harder to do. And that is what a lot of people are misinterpreting as AI is slowing down, right? Where if I have a set of questions that are, 10,000 questions, and like, you know, on model Y, I get 9,000 of them correct, but then model, Y2, I get another 100 questions correct. It's like, oh, it hasn't really made that much of an improvement. But it's like, well, actually, like it's made a huge amount of improvement, because like those next 100 questions were like wildly harder than the previous ones, right? So this is what people talk about when they talk about benchmark saturation, where we could actually be seeing improvement, but like, hey, the line is actually plateauing, ergo AI is slowing down. And it's like that is definitely not something that you can actually infer from these graphics, right? Or rather, if you can infer that, you would have to have more information to do so, which is true of some benchmarks. And so, one thing that the ARC AGI challenge put forth was like, we are, we're oversaturating on benchmarks in a negative way. Here's one that I don't think that AI systems today can actually accomplish. And so what we're seeing here is that the ARC AGI challenge was put forth, and we're seeing that there's some improvement on it, but it hasn't been able to actually hit that sort of plateau yet. And I think that this slide might be at least a few days old, because we've had some development on that end recently. So this was way back in time, 72 hours ago. But here we are.
That's the other scary thing. I don't even feel I feel like with both uh, creating content around crypto and AI specifically, because that's kind of a focus here for Future Signal. I think that those are the two things that are kind of signaling where the future is going to go. The It's so hard to freaking create content because by the time this is created and this is out, it's already it doesn't mean anything. one of the first episodes you came on,
Right.
we created it and you said, oh, that will probably happen in, I don't know, a month. And by the time the episode was out, 3 days later, by the time I had taken it, we had recorded, I had edited it and published it to the world, it was already old news. That to
Right,
me is
right. But
crazy.
think about that incentive though. Going back to what I was saying, think about the incentives as a content creator. That like your incentive is to be wildly hyperbolic, either in the favor of AGI is here and it's crazy, or like everything sucks and like there's no such thing as AGI, just so that you can stay ahead of the curve. And like if that is the incentive that's on the industry, of course we're going to have a crazy perspective on the speed that things are moving, because all we're getting is the AI hype and doomer people pushing this stuff out. So I think you hit the nail on the head that like that is part of the reason why people are confused about AI, because like the people creating this content are just like, hey, got to stay ahead of the curve. You know what I mean?
Wow. Wild. This is another tweet that I pulled down 20 minutes ago, so I'm sure it's
Right.
already out of date. It says, we announced OpenAI O1 just 3 months ago. Today we announced O3, and we have every reason to believe this trajectory will continue. Now, it had two images. I want to go and show these images. So here's image one and image two. Let me
Yeah.
go back to image one. Can you talk about what I'm looking at here?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the image on the left, we're talking about a benchmark, and the benchmark is software engineering verified. Essentially, this is a selection of tickets, as software engineers call them, where there's a request for a change to some software, or maybe there's an error associated with that software. It's coupled with the code on which that request is being made, or on which that error has been identified. And then there's a third component, which is usually like details of the request, right? So like it needs to conform to these requirements, or it has to accomplish X, Y, and Z. It needs to, make sure that it's adhering to like these style guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. So those three things come together as a ticket, and that's essentially what software engineers do every day. I'm generalizing like in a huge way. Sorry, that's usually the standard unit of work that a software engineer will do. That's not at all what encompasses like what a software engineer will do all the time, but software engineering bench is a collection of those tickets. And so the idea is that if we can get a system that is able to complete those tasks well, then, or at least as we measure the ability of a system to complete those tasks, we will have a sense of how aligned that system is with human capabilities, right? So if they can complete, 10% of those tasks, 20% of those tasks, well, then they're actually, that you might start considering like this is something that, we could have a software engineer pair with a system to maybe improve what they're doing. And so this trajectory on the left is truly like, and I'm not trying to be dramatic or funny. Like this to me truly is terrifying. Like as someone who makes his money as a software engineer, and in some respects, that's like what I'm really focused on. Of course, there's also like architecture conversations that you're a part of and other things, but like as someone who just completes tickets, this trajectory is truly terrifying, right? And what they don't show you is the dates, right? So O1 preview came out 3 months ago, right? When it hit 41%, 41.3%, we were all like, whoa, like, and this isn't a multiple choice thing. It's not like a flip of the coin, like 50% of the time it gets it right. It's like I am completing what a software engineer does to the level that I would expect as a software engineering manager 41% of the time. And we were like, that is absolutely crazy, right?
Wow.
And then, of course, a month later, it was at 48%. To have another step change within a 3 month time period to get it to 71% is again like I had chills. Like I had that vertigo moment where all of a sudden the entire world came into perspective because the sun was rising, like that astronaut, where like this particular figure says like 18 months from now I will not be writing code, which is just insane. I might be reviewing code, I might be again asking questions that guide some of the code generation, but if we're able to, and that is again a broad generalization, but like if we're able to do this on a benchmark that has been verified and accepted the across the industry, it really does like send chills down my spine. And so that's sort of what's happening on the left there. Yeah.
And then, do you want to talk about the one on the right, or should I go to the next image?
No, sure. So the one on the right, this is competition code. So this is like leak code, and other things. The same sort of deal where like we're talking about now. It's in the 99th percentile of all competitive coders worldwide.
Okay.
And just to be clear, so the blue section there was what they are calling like low compute mode, where it only spent X compute to make it work. And then the smaller blue part at the top that represents the high compute
Mhm.
mode. And just so folks know the difference, that they did have a variability in their benchmarking. And again, this is less interesting to me just because it's competitive code, and that usually doesn't it might align, it might be tangential to standard coding practices as a software engineer, but to the left, it's like that is like people's job every day is now being completed at a really high level by these agents, and we should be paying attention.
And is this worth talking about, or should we move forward?
No, yes, same deal where, 2% is actually quite big. Where the previous state of the art was being completed by like high level PhD mathematicians. I mean, think like the sort of like jaw dropping like Goodwill Hunting moment,
Mm.
where like, oh, this janitor was able to complete this task and like blah blah blah, right? I mean, that's sort of what we're getting across the industry for these agents being able to, or these models being able to complete these tasks, even up to 25% is like really jaw dropping. And we'll see if this benchmark is even um, is fully saturated in 2025. My anticipation is that it will be.
Wow. Continuing to move forward, I don't know if we have enough time to go into these. Do we want to save this for another episode just so we can close this one off well? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. This is the ARC AGI challenge. I won't go into it,
Yeah,
but
let's
this is just what.
yeah, let's leave
Yeah.
this for the next one, because I think that diving into this, it goes back to that slide that also showed when the ARC Prize started. We're gonna
Yep.
leave that. That's just a little tease, but this is something I did want to share. This from Anthony Pompliano. He said AI will help you create wealth, and Bitcoin will help you preserve it. This is the story of the next 10 years. And you kind of touched upon this earlier in the episode when you're like, yeah, I have $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I let my AI agent, basically spend that as the agent sees fit to be able to get done the things that I needed to get done, whether it's getting me a reservation at Chili's or buying me a flight to Cabo or fighting over a parking ticket with maybe, the local municipality or whatever. So I just kind of wanted to share that because I think AI and Bitcoin are two big focuses here on Future Signal. I'm just going to go right to the question. So every week, the previous guest will ask the next guest a question. So Hugh Aprile was on last week, and we focused on Bitcoin as a technology for good. He works for Mercy Corps, and he's an international development practitioner. And we were talking about Bitcoin out in the field. And so he was like, dude, I want to hear Andy talk about how AI, how people are using AI for good, some of the use cases maybe he's seen. And actually, you can't use this use case, but here's a little cheat. On episode 3, we had Deepa come on, and she talked about the organization that she's created called Grant Orb. And I should send you that. I'd be interested to get your feedback on the entire AI structure there. And that basically helps people to be able to apply and write grants very, very, very quickly, because oftentimes that is a time suck, an energy suck, and a money suck for nonprofits or for any companies or organizations that are looking to leverage grants. So you can't use that one. But in your estimation, how are people using AI for good? And I think your work is part of this. So
Um, Yeah, there's a lot of examples, which I would love to have an episode where we're just talking about all the great stuff
we
that's
can
happening,
we can
right? I mean,
easily do that
kind of
whenever you have time. It's hard for me to get on your
raising the alarm
calendar.
bells too much. No, yeah, all right. Well, as long as you give me Bitcoin advice, then we'll
That's
do
an
it
even
really
trade.
well.
That's an even trade.
No, so I really like there's two organizations that I think are doing really top-notch work. I mean, there's a ton, but two organizations doing top-notch work and then sharing it with the world. And that is the Allen Institute for AI. They are like really adamant about open sourcing everything that they do, and that's not just the model weights, but it's also the data that went into the model and the model training algorithms and other things that it's they're not. I wouldn't call them like a frontier lab in the same way that like Google, OpenAI, Meta, and et cetera are, but like their research is like actually pushing the industry forward and helping bring people together along the way, or bring people along with them as they go. And then the other is DeepMind, Google DeepMind. They're not nearly as open source. I mean, they're again a for-profit. They're part of the for-profit, company Google, but the research that's coming out of there is just pretty jaw-dropping. And what I'll focus on to answer this question specifically is some of the research that's coming out of DeepMind in particular. One of them, I think that I'm sure folks have heard about, is AlphaFold. AlphaFold is helping folks complete wildly complex protein folding problems, such that they can essentially have a sequence of biological information and then have this model process it and then spit out a 3D structure for that protein. It doesn't sound like super exciting or very sexy, but end of the day, this is how drugs are discovered. This is how diseases are eradicated, and because they can properly target some of the areas that are impacted by the disease, or better understand the underlying causes of the disease and those sorts of things. So I really think that having this the first two iterations of AlphaFold be completely open source were like truly just like breathtaking from a research perspective, but also just had a great impact on the world. AlphaFold 3 is now proprietary and it's closed, but there's ways to access it. And I think that a lot of folks probably saw that the CEO of Google DeepMind did win the Nobel Prize for Chemistry because of AlphaFold, which is just wild to think about. That we're having such like scientific contribution, based on an artificial intelligence, product. But that's really great. And then truly, if you just add the term alpha to just about anything, they have a version of it. So there's Alpha Coder, which is doing amazing stuff along the same lines. There's Alpha. Is it Alpha Geometry? Alpha Proof is amazing because it's actually processing and generating mathematical proofs, and some other things. But yeah, they're tackling material science. I think that having these open source products, being able to push these industries forward in ways that the practitioners within those domains wouldn't have been able to anticipate 5 years ago. I think that it's adding more to the progress than I think is taking away from it. So DeepMind, AlphaFold, definitely my answer.
Yeah, and I will totally have you come back as we wrap this episode up, because I think we could touch on those, dive a little bit deeper to talk about how they're approaching diseases. I think that that's fascinating. And then also coming back and talking about
Yep.
AGI and the ARC Prize. I want to learn more about that, because that seems like a Hunger Games, but for good, or at least, to push AI in an interesting direction. But now,
Yeah, and
yes.
just
Yeah.
sorry, real quick, just like the very snippet, like we will talk about it in more detail, but like ARC AGI has been a challenge that has existed for a while that has been
Sure.
unsolvable, and humans get around 80% and 75%, whatever. For the first time ever, we have a model that has exceeded human capabilities on it,
Mhm.
and it's absolutely mind blowing to think about. But that happened yesterday. And so it's absolutely insane how quickly this is moving. Let's talk about it in more detail later, but if there's like one thing that you do research on, from my perspective, it's what went into that, and what folks are thinking about as a result of that being true.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the new Willow chip from Google. That could be an entire episode. Um,
Right.
Now it's your turn to ask the next guest. And the next guest is going to be Addie Lamar. She is a cybersecurity professional. She's going to come on and we're going to talk about Web 2 and Web 3 cybersecurity. So, what is your question for Addie?
Question for
Yeah,
Addie.
just about cybersecurity. It could be anything, not just related to obviously Web 3, but anything.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so what does it mean for cybersecurity when I'm not gonna have a great. I'll finish with the
Okay.
question because I need to think
Okay.
about it. But I'm just thinking about like, what does it mean for anyone with an internet connection to have a super weapon, or access to a super weapon. A lot of people, when they're raising money, are all blue sky. We love it. We're making AI, and it's going to be great. We're making like a super friend, or we're making a super recipe generator, right? But like no one is pitching on the idea that they're making the world's most powerful cyber weapon. And that's what they're doing. Because like not only will you have something that can be deployed, but you can also have something that will deal with any threat that might be attacking it to prevent it from doing what it's trying to do, which is to break into Jarrett's crypto wallet, and take everything that you own, right? And so I guess my question is like, in the age of AI, just for Addy, like in the age of AI, like what what can what should we be doing as a society to protect ourselves against a wildly asymmetrical threat of every citizen having the power of a state, because they have API access to some of these cyber weapons?
That is the heaviest question I will get to ask a guest, and the longest. So thank you, Andy.
I'll try. Sorry, I'll try and formalize it a little bit better, maybe offline.
No, that's good.
But
That's good.
no, man,
That's good.
like
No, because I have the same concerns, and I asked you
um,
that earlier. I said, what are the concerns then that you have when everyone has all these agents? When we live in a world where there's more agents than humans, which will totally happen because every single human eventually will have 3 or 4 agents, and then that's easy. It's just like every single human has 3 or 4 apps on their phone, right? So it's just kind of like, you know. But let's wind up. I know I want to keep this close to the 90-minute mark. We can always talk for longer. I feel like when you come on, it's just like we need 3 hours. We need like a marathon. But I want to have you come back on. I want to talk about the ARC Prize, and I want to have you come back on and talk about the good things that are being done with AI, because I think that those are lost. That's the signal, but it's lost by the noise, which is like you said, I went to go bake a cake and it told me 600 pounds, and I just couldn't be like, oh, it's probably 600 grams. Let me move forward, make my cake. AI isn't broken, So
right,
anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe. Listening to some podcast platform, please subscribe. Make sure you're following us at Future Signal Pod. Wherever you are, you can go to futuresignal.xyz as well. That's the website. Andy, if it's cool, I'm going to leave your LinkedIn. I think I did that last time if people want to get in touch with you. And I would seriously like to have you back on in January if you can come back on. We need to find a new date, because this stuff is, the fact that by the time I even get this out, it gets old news that we talked about the ARC AGI, because you said it just cracked yesterday on December 20th. I mean, that's just crazy. So anyways, Andy, thank you for joining, and stay on the line because you and I need to talk offline about holiday plans. That's all. So
yeah, for sure. And cool. So listen, now that we're not rolling anymore, what's it like being Satoshi Nakamoto? Like,
bye,
is that
everyone.